After this quick demonstration, you're going to be able to understand what type of effect that sugar has on your body. This soap is going to serve as glucose. And when we eat a diet that's full of fiber, good healthy fats, and healthy protein, our body doesn't elicit a big glucose spike. Now, let's pretend we're going to eat the standard American diet, full of processed carbs and sugar. Let's see what happens to our glucose. Our glucose spike is high. And because our glucose spiked way high, our body's going to release a lot of insulin to cover all that glucose. And because our cells are being continually flooded with insulin, we become insulin resistant.
What's being proposed in this video is a flawed model of insulin resistance. The model is that the more insulin we produce, the less sensitive our cells become to insulin. Therefore, anything that increases insulin, such as dietary carbohydrates, is going to negatively impact our insulin sensitivity. And low insulin sensitivity is called insulin resistance. It is true that insulin resistance is likely detrimental to our health and longevity. With that being said, insulin itself does not cause insulin resistance. And this is demonstrated by numerous studies on high carbohydrate diets, which elicit much higher insulin responses, showing that high carbohydrate diets actually increase insulin sensitivity, but high fat diets decrease insulin sensitivity. This graph shows it quite well. The white line is an individual on a high carbohydrate diet, and the black line is an individual on a high fat diet. And this graph represents their blood glucose after being given a bolus of carbohydrates. As you can see, the individual following the high carbohydrate diet had a much easier time controlling their blood glucose, whereas the individual on the high fat diet had a much more pronounced blood glucose increase and a much more difficult time getting their blood glucose back down to normal. And the longer it takes to get your blood glucose back to normal, the more insulin resistant an individual is. With that being said, I'm not saying not to eat high-fat, low-carbohydrate diets. But what this demonstrates is that high-fat diets induce what's called physiologic insulin resistance. This is a short-term resistance to insulin due to elevated free fatty acids in the bloodstream that come as a result of a high-fat diet. This is not pathologic because it can simply be reversed in a few days of a lower-fat, higher-carbohydrate feeding. But on individuals who are always going to be on a low-carbohydrate diet, their insulin sensitivity may not even be that important because they're not eating an excess of glucose. But as both of these studies demonstrate, high carbohydrate diets actually appear to increase insulin sensitivity. And this is because free fatty acids in the bloodstream can actually reduce one's response to insulin. With that being said, what actually causes insulin resistance is an accumulation of fat inside of things like our muscle and our liver. And this accumulation of fat impedes the cell from properly responding to insulin, therefore impeding it from uptaking glucose out of the bloodstream. And the driver of excess fat accumulation is simply excessive caloric consumption, whether it comes from dietary fat or dietary carbohydrate. With that being said, the most dangerous thing is when the fat sits inside of the cell for a long period of time, and it goes through a process called rancidification. Importantly, exercise can actually prevent rancidification, because exercise will utilize the fat as energy. Therefore, it does not sit inside the cell long enough to rancidify, which is why exercise, irrespective of weight loss, can improve insulin sensitivity. And weight loss in and of itself, whether it's from a high carbohydrate diet or a low carbohydrate diet, also enhances insulin sensitivity. Therefore, you do not have to be scared of the people telling you that carbohydrates themselves cause insulin resistance. And if you want to learn how to take control of your health and energy, send me a DM to sign up for coaching.